There comes a moment in every life when God says, that's enough of hiding who you really are. A divine interruption breaks through the monotony, the fear, the pretending, and suddenly your life is positioned for transformation. You see, people have grown comfortable with the version of you that makes them feel safe, the watered down, dimmed light version. But what they didn't know is that a shift is coming. And when you do this one thing, not 10, not 20, just one bold, obedient act, they won't be able to label you the same way ever again. Because this moment is not about proving them wrong. It's about aligning with who God already said you are. The enemy hopes you'll second guess yourself, stay stuck in that old chapter, cling to what's familiar. But this thing you're about to do, it's going to reintroduce you, not as who you used to be, but as the healed, whole, walking in purpose, unstoppable version of you. You're not being dramatic. You're being delivered. You're not acting brand new. You're stepping into who you've always been underneath the pain, underneath the pressure. So today, I dare you to decide. Not because it's easy, not because it's comfortable, but because there's a version of you waiting on the other side of one obedient, spirit-led move. And when you do this, when you finally choose power over fear, purpose over fear, freedom over familiarity, the room will shift, the atmosphere will recognize you, and trust me, they will never see you the same again. There's a shift that takes place the moment you stop molding yourself to fit the expectations of others. A shift so deep, so sacred, it changes how heaven moves on your behalf. Choosing authenticity over approval isn't just a bold decision. It's a spiritual declaration. It's you announcing to the world, I no longer need to shrink for you to feel tall. I no longer need your applause to confirm my anointing. And when you say that with your actions, not just your words, everything begins to align with who you truly are. Many of us have spent years building masks, smiling through pain, dimming our light so others won't feel insecure, editing our voices to make sure we don't sound too passionate, too aggressive, too much. But there's a moment in your journey where the mask gets too heavy, where pretending starts to suffocate you more than rejection ever could. And it's in that moment you hear God say, I didn't call the version of you that's performing. I called the version of you that's been hidden, misunderstood, and underestimated. And when God calls the real you, you can't keep wearing costumes for comfort. Approval feels safe, but it's also a prison. It tricks you into thinking that the more you please, the more you'll be loved. But the truth is, the more you lose yourself for people's comfort, the more disconnected you become from your own divine identity. There's a cost to approval, a cost you've already paid in tears, in silence, in lost years, and missed opportunities. You've shown up as 80% of yourself, hoping that would be enough. You've dimmed your light thinking it would make others love you more, but they still didn't see you, still didn't choose you, still didn't honor the depth of who you are. So now it's time to stop bargaining with your worth. When you choose authenticity, it's not just about being real. It's about being whole. It's about saying, this is me, healed and healing, broken and blessed, rising and still working through the ruins. And when you do that, the atmosphere has no choice but to adjust. People will either rise to meet the truth of who you are or fall away because they can't manipulate the real you. But either way, it's not your job to protect their comfort. It's your assignment to protect your calling. There is a unique boldness that comes when you get tired of living beneath your truth. It's the boldness of a woman who's cried her last tear trying to be liked. It's the boldness of a man who no longer needs validation to feel valuable. It's the power of someone who's done performing. You start walking differently. You speak with more clarity. You show up in rooms and no longer need to shrink to fit. And suddenly, the very people who overlooked you now don't know how to categorize you. Because you've stepped into a version of yourself they never saw coming. But let me tell you something, choosing authenticity will cost you. It will cost you some friendships. It will cost you some followers. It may even cost you approval from the very people you once craved it from. But what you gain, peace, clarity, confidence, the sound of your own voice again, the ability to look in the mirror and finally recognize yourself, and more importantly, the favor of God that only rests on what's real. God doesn't anoint performances. He anoints purpose. Some people only loved the version of you they could control. They loved the version that agreed with everything, the version that never spoke up, the version that said yes when your spirit screamed no. But when you choose authenticity, you start disappointing people who benefited from your silence. And that's okay. You weren't created to be everyone's source of comfort. You were created to be a reflection of God's glory. And that requires being unapologetically true to who He created you to be. There is something holy about owning your truth. It doesn't mean you're perfect. It means you're present. It means you're no longer hiding your insecurities behind filters, your pain behind smiles, your story behind shame. It means your yes is rooted in alignment, not obligation. Your no is spoken without guilt. Your energy is protected. Your space is sacred. And when people ask, what changed? You'll be able to say, I stopped performing. I chose me. I chose peace. I chose truth. We've been trained to believe that pleasing others makes us good, that sacrificing ourselves for their comfort is holy. But Jesus didn't die so you could live in fragments. He died so you could live in fullness. So you could stop hiding, stop pretending, stop minimizing the oil on your life. When you choose authenticity, you step into the fullness of your assignment. You become bold enough to walk away from what no longer feeds your spirit. You become brave enough to be misunderstood for a moment so you can be aligned for a lifetime. Choosing authenticity over approval is an act of spiritual warfare. It breaks generational patterns of people-pleasing. It interrupts cycles of codependency. It sets new standards for the next generation watching you. They won't have to wonder what it looks like to be whole because you modeled it. You showed them what it means to be firm in your boundaries, rooted in your faith, and confident in your calling. And all it took was one choice. Not perfection, not applause, just the decision to no longer betray yourself for the sake of being liked. There is nothing louder than the quiet confidence of someone who knows who they are in God. You don't have to announce it. You don't have to defend it. Your presence becomes a sermon. Your energy becomes your protection. People will feel the shift, and not everyone will know how to respond. Some will try to gaslight you back into smallness. Others will distance themselves because your authenticity convicts their comfort. But that's none of your business. Your only responsibility is to remain true. True to your growth. True to your boundaries, true to the God in you. And here's what's wild. The moment you stop seeking their approval is the moment you start attracting what's meant for you. The rooms that used to reject you will start to make space for you. The relationships that drained you will fall away to make room for ones that pour back. The opportunities that once seemed out of reach will chase after your authenticity. Because favor follows what's real. Elevation follows what's honest. And healing begins when you finally say, I choose me. I choose truth. I choose to be who God called me to be, even if it means being misunderstood. Let them talk. Let them question. Let them whisper. Because once you've tasted what it feels like to be whole, to be seen, to be loved for your truth and not your performance, there's no going back. You won't crave their validation anymore. You won't shrink anymore. You won't explain anymore. You'll just walk with grace, with clarity, with the unshakable knowing that the real you was always enough. There comes a point in your growth where you realize that explaining yourself no longer serves your spirit. You've spent so much time trying to get people to understand you, to see the real you, to validate your intentions, and yet, no matter how many words you used, They still misread your silence, misunderstood your heart, and misjudged your journey. When you stop explaining and start elevating, it's not because you've changed for the worse. It's because you've outgrown the need to be understood by people who were never assigned to grasp your vision in the first place. Explaining becomes exhausting when you're speaking to ears that were never meant to hear you. You keep repeating yourself, adjusting yourself, softening your truth so they won't be offended. But the truth is, no amount of explanation will satisfy a heart that's already decided who you are. Some people aren't confused, they're committed to misunderstanding you. They liked you better when you were unsure, insecure, and accessible. They liked you better when you needed their approval, their advice, their validation. But the moment you begin to rise, to walk in clarity, to trust your own voice, the explanations start to feel unnecessary because they are. When you start elevating, it's not just about status or success. It's about rising into who God created you to be without asking permission. It's about allowing the fruit of your life to speak louder than the words that once tried to explain it. There's a holy confidence that comes with elevation. It's not arrogance. It's alignment. It's when you no longer feel the urge to justify your boundaries, your peace, your silence, or your decision. It's when you realize that God has already validated what others are still questioning, and that is enough. Some of the most powerful moments of your life won't come from what you say. They'll come from what you stop saying. Silence is a strategy when you know who you are. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is let people talk while you continue to walk. Let them speculate, let them assume, let them gossip. Because while they're still stuck on the version of you that's no longer alive, you're evolving into someone they've never met. And the next time they see you, you won't look like what you've been through. You'll be walking in something they can't label, because elevation always confuses people who are still stuck in who you used to be. There's something sacred about getting to a place where your energy is too expensive to spend on proving yourself. You begin to value your peace more than your reputation. You understand that not every attack deserves a reaction. Not every false perception needs a correction. You realize that God is your defender, your elevator, your vindicator, and when He raises you, no opinion can reduce you. When you stop explaining, you protect your power. You stop bleeding your energy into empty spaces. You stop trying to drag people along who were never meant to go with you. There are some places God is calling you to that can't carry the weight of your explanations. You can't keep pausing your progress to make everyone comfortable. You can't keep slowing down your growth to give step-by-step instructions on your healing. They may not understand why you don't answer every call. They may not get why your circle got smaller, why your voice got stronger, why your faith became loud. But that's not your responsibility anymore. You don't owe anyone access to your process. You owe God your obedience. Sometimes the need to explain comes from an old version of us that feared rejection. We wanted to be liked, to be accepted, to be chosen, even if it meant making ourselves smaller to fit their expectations. But healing changes you, growth matures you, obedience develops you. And before you know it, you no longer desire to be palatable, you desire to be purposeful. And purpose doesn't need to be explained, it just needs to be walked out. With integrity, with faith, with boldness. There is a certain clarity that comes with choosing elevation. It doesn't mean you have all the answers, but it means you're no longer asking for permission to pursue them. It means your feet are planted even when your path is unfamiliar. It means your yes is rooted in divine instruction, not public opinion. And when people ask, why are you doing this now? Or who do you think you are? You won't feel obligated to explain, because you've learned that sometimes elevation requires separation, not explanation. People may call it distance, coldness, arrogance. They'll give it names that make them feel comfortable. But you know the truth. You know that God has been calling you higher, that this is not about being better than anyone. It's about being obedient to the divine blueprint on your life. You're not leaving them behind out of pride. You're moving forward out of purpose. And if they're meant to go with you, they'll understand eventually. But you can't afford to keep shrinking while waiting for them to catch up. There is a cost to elevation. It costs you the need to be liked. It costs you comfort, familiarity, and sometimes companionship. But what you gain is sacred. You gain discernment, you gain focus, you gain time. You begin to see how much energy you wasted trying to be understood when your life was never meant to be explained. It was meant to be witnessed. The fruit of your elevation will speak in ways your words never could. Let your glow confuse them. Let your growth offend them. Let your gratitude speak volumes. You will know you're elevating when peace becomes more attractive than being right, when clarity feels better than being liked, when you start moving differently, not out of bitterness, but out of betterment. You begin to let go of the desire to fix every misunderstanding. You stop trying to rescue relationships that no longer reflect your future. You stop offering seats at your table to people who only came to question your menu. Because when you've tasted the goodness of God in your growth, you stop inviting people who are allergic to your anointing. Your elevation is not for everyone to understand. It's not for everyone to clap for. Some will question how you got here. Some will wonder what makes you think you're qualified. But what they don't know is that your elevation didn't come from striving. It came from surrendering, from kneeling when no one saw, from praying when everything was falling apart, from trusting God when the path made no sin. That kind of elevation doesn't need an explanation. It speaks for itself. It carries a weight that can't be faked and a peace that can't be stolen. You've already done enough explaining, enough oversharing, enough trying to bring people into your inner process. Now it's time to move in silence, to build in secret, to elevate without announcement, not out of pride, but out of protection. Because what you're building now requires undistracted focus. What you're stepping into now demands a different level of trust, of privacy, of reverence. Everyone doesn't need to know the details. They'll see the evidence, the glow, the favor, the oil. And when they ask what changed, you'll know deep in your spirit, you stopped explaining and you started elevating. There's a sacred kind of growth that doesn't come with noise, applause, or validation. It's the kind that happens in silence, in the shadows, in the quiet places where God does his deepest work. The power of a silent transformation is that it teaches you how to evolve without announcing, how to heal without performing, and how to change without needing witnesses. You don't post about it. You don't explain it. You don't defend it, you just live it. You just become it. And when people finally see you again, they're stunned because your glow is undeniable and your presence feels unfamiliar. This kind of transformation confuses people because they're used to tracking your progress. They're used to watching your every move, commenting on your every step, measuring your success by their standards. But when the transformation happens in silence, there's no blueprint for them to follow. There's no warning. You didn't tell them what you were working on. You didn't invite them to the process. You let God do what he needed to do in private. And that's what makes the transformation powerful. It wasn't public opinion that shaped you. It was divine intention. When you go through silent transformation, there are no cheering crowds. No congratulations, no applause, just you and God, face to face, day after day, in the rawness of surrender. You learn how to face your fears without the pressure to perform. You confront your patterns without the need to be seen. You take accountability without the need to broadcast it. And slowly, steadily, something begins to shift. Not on the outside first, but within. Your thoughts get clearer, your standards get higher, your spirit gets quieter. And before anyone else can recognize it, You feel the change in your bones. The beauty of silent transformation is that it teaches you to stop performing healing and start living it. There's no more need to prove how much better you're doing, no more energy wasted trying to convince others that you've grown. You know you've healed because what used to trigger you no longer has access to you. You know you've matured because what once deserved a reaction now only gets your peace. You know you've changed because you're no longer rushing to be seen. You're rooted in being whole. This is the kind of change that doesn't shout, it radiates. God does his most powerful work in the dark, in the womb, in the soil, in the stillness. And that's why the transformation hits different, because it didn't come from outside pressure, it came from divine preparation. People will assume you disappeared, that you pulled back, that you're being distant, but what they don't realize is that you were in process. You were cocooned. You were being stripped, redefined, reformed. You were in the hands of the potter, letting him mold you, reshape you, and breathe new vision into dry places. There's a certain strength that only comes from silence. When no one is around to hype you up, you learn how to speak life over yourself. When no one checks on you, you learn how to check in with your own spirit. You stop relying on the noise, the likes, the reposts, and the feedback to affirm your worth. You begin to understand that what God is doing in you is far more important than what people are saying about you. And that shift, that quiet shift, becomes the foundation of a version of you that doesn't need validation to know you're valuable. You'll know you're transforming when your prayers start sounding different. You're no longer begging God for people, platforms, or applause. You're asking for wisdom, peace, and discernment. You're seeking clarity instead of control. You're releasing instead of grasping. You stop trying to force outcomes and start trusting God's timing. That's the kind of shift that doesn't always feel good, but it builds spiritual muscle. And that muscle is what carries you into the version of yourself that you've been praying to become. People will start to notice the change, but they won't be able to pinpoint when or how it happened. That's the power of silent transformation. You didn't announce the fast, the therapy, the inner work, the lonely nights, the prayers soaked in tears. You didn't document the losses, the disappointments, or the moments you almost gave up. You just kept going. You kept showing up. You kept surrendering. And now your fruit is doing the talking. Your peace is preaching. Your glow is giving testimony. You didn't need to tell them. They feel it when you walk in the room. This type of transformation will feel lonely. You'll want to reach for the phone, to call someone, to share what's happening. But God will whisper, let me finish it first, because there's some things too sacred to be shared before they're sealed. When you move in silence, you allow God to complete the work without interference, without commentary, without distraction. You give yourself permission to heal without performance, to grow without judgment, to rise without needing a crowd. If you hurry, it will pass us, and we will never know. What is the case that you are preparing for? And in that silence, you develop a relationship with yourself that you've never had before. You learn your rhythms, your triggers, your desires. You learn how to sit with your pain without rushing it, how to hold space for your joy without apologizing for it. You begin to honor your body, your time, your energy, and your voice. And when you reemerge,